Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Economics and You. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson. Today, we're going to be looking at the organization and functions of the Federal Reserve System, or the Fed. First, let's get used to calling it the Fed. The Federal Reserve System, the Fed, is responsible for U.S. monetary policy. Monetary policy is another one of those terms we got to get used to saying. Feel it on your tongue. Know how it tastes to say monetary policy. Monetary policies are what control the amount of money in our economy. If we've got too much money, it helps us contract. If we've got too little money, it helps us expand. That's what monetary policy is for, and it is the Fed's primary responsibility. And the Fed uses this monetary policy, expansion and contraction of money supply, in order to promote growth in our economy while also controlling for inflation and increasing employment. Those are the big three: growth, inflation, and employment. Monetary policy, the Fed. Got it? Awesome. So the Fed organization, how do they organize themselves to do this? Well, it begins with their board of governors. The Federal Reserve has 7 members on their board of governors, and each one is appointed to serve a 14-year term. So these folks are there for a long time, and we want to make sure that people who sit on the Federal Reserve Board really know their stuff, really know the economy and how it moves. The president, whoever the president is, gets to appoint a new member once every 2 years. So once every 2 years, we have a new member onto the Fed. And then the Fed themselves gets to choose who their leader is. Right now, the leader of the Fed is Janet Yellen. She is the chairman of the Federal Reserve, which makes her an incredibly powerful and important woman in American politics. Fed decisions, Janet Yellen's decisions, are independent of the president and Congress. Once appointed, Janet Yellen and those 6 other members of the Federal Reserve Board, they have complete authority over monetary policy in the United States. That's big. These are important people. Janet Yellen, she big, she strong, she tough. She controls monetary policy. Fed banks. All right. So the Federal Reserve System has 12 Federal Reserve banks. That's because we have a big country. We have a lot of money. It takes a lot to manage all of this, and we can't put all of that management on those 7 people up at the board. So we have these 12 Federal Reserve banks whose primary job is to oversee monetary policies within their districts and to make sure that those policies are being carried out. The districts look something like this and are spread out throughout the country based on population. Cool. The government's bank, another role of the Federal Reserve. One function is to serve as the government's bank. This is where the government of the United States of America has its money. Gold is also kept here. People like to think Fort Knox has tons of gold. Fort Knox, sure. But the Federal Reserve banks, that's where the gold really be at. Another thing they do, checks from the federal government come from the Federal Reserve. So if you get these little Treasury bank notes, right, and the United States Treasury is going to be sending you $574 or whatever it might be. It's signed over by the Treasury, but the Treasury's bank is the Federal Reserve. The Fed is also a financial advisor to the U.S. government and will periodically give advice for fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is not monetary policy. We'll get into fiscal policy at another time. But the Fed does advise on that. All right, clearing checks. This is a kind of a practical example of one of the other things the Federal Reserve does that helps our entire banking system work, is they help to clear checks. So when people write checks, we are transferring money from one bank account to another, and the Federal Reserve is going to help them to do that. And this ensures that balances are updated properly and everything is managed the way it's supposed to be so nobody loses money in these transfers. So this is how it works. Here's you. Let's say you live in Philadelphia. All right, you write a $100 check to a friend of yours in San Francisco, 2 different Federal Reserve areas. So the friend takes that to the bank gives them $100. But the bank then has to send that check forward to the Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco. Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco is going to add $100 to the bank account of your friend and then pass that check along to the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia, which is going to subtract $100 from your bank account, making sure that the bank accounts even out the way that they need to, and that you have now had your $100 deducted from your bank account. That's a process of clearing a check and the involvement of the Federal Reserve System in doing so. Kind of neat, kind of practical, but there are some bigger picture monetary policy stuff that we are going to get into next time. That was all for today. I hope you learned something. Farewell.